Hi there, it's Mr. Adams here, a mathematics teacher with over 20 years of experience. In this video, I want to explain the counterintuitive concept of reducing capital gains tax down to zero for housing. At the moment, there's only really two options that are put on the table and when it comes to capital gains tax. One is to keep it where it is, the other is to increase it or reduce the discount, however you want to think about it. And there are various parties that are pushing this agenda. However, I want to consider a third alternative. My idea will reduce the price of housing, save the federal government billions of dollars, make 99% of voters better off, and increase the rate of home ownership. As hard as this is to believe, this is what my idea can deliver. I want everyone to own their own home. Now, if we raise the capital gains tax, well, that's discouraging people from selling existing properties. If we reduce the capital gains tax, well, that encourages people to sell. So the only way that we can get everyone to own their own home is if existing investors sell their properties to renters. You would be correct to say that this is a massive windfall for the rich, but let's pursue this idea a little bit further. So for a start, not all taxes need to be progressive. Now, if this was my only idea, then this would be absolutely terrible. It's not even rich people would suggest this. Now, I have plenty of ideas, but I only need one of these ideas to actually make this work, and that would be removing all rental deductions. When you make a loss on an investment property, you can claim that back from the Australian Tax Office. Now that is what negative gearing is, and that costs the budget about $10 billion a year. When you're a landlord, you can deduct expenses like interest. Now this costs the taxpayer about $30 billion a year, which is 3 times the amount of negative gearing. So the big question is, why do we allow interest deductions for landlords, but not for first home buyers? Way that an economist would answer this is they would say housing is an investment, therefore you should be able to make tax deductions on it. My rebuttal to this would be that it doesn't create any extra property. It gives people with property more money to outbid people without property. Housing is an essential service and we should treat it as such. Even if you do consider it to be investment, it is actually highly unproductive. Let's put these two ideas together to see what would happen. Let's get rid of all capital gains tax and also let's get rid of all rental deductions. If we remove all the capital gains tax for housing, that's going to cost us about $10 billion a year. But if we remove all the rental deductions, that will save us $30 billion a year. So the net saving here is $20 billion annually, and not a cent is going to come from a renter. We're going to profoundly change investor behaviour. It becomes enticing to sell an investment property because you can do so without any capital gain. So that's the carrot here. It also becomes more difficult to hold onto any property because you can't have the deductions that you could have had previously. So that's the stick there. Here we have the carrot and the stick working in the same direction, not against each other like many of the other suggestions do. This is one of those truly rare situations where everyone wins, because renters get houses to buy, investors get away from their current investments without tax burden, and this will create this less resistance because there's something for everyone. Even if you only own one home, you are not worse off. Now, I created a whole video series about that and you can check those out. I like to think about this as a bit of a truce. Landlords get to walk away from housing investment tax-free. They're not the villains here. They've made decisions based on what were the rules of the time. Renters also get the cheaper houses to buy. So when you frame it as what would be a compromise, this suggestion is actually a compromise. It's not trying to force one side to yield. It is about trying to find that situation where both parties can walk away with something. Tax compliance is tricky. Often taxes don't raise as much money as expected because people avoid it with either tax planning or illegal activity. So if the capital gains tax was raised to 75%, you would have people doing all sorts of things to try and avoid it because there's now more incentive to avoid it. So increasing the tax by 50% won't give you 50% more returns. However, if the capital gains tax is reduced to zero, there is nothing for the ATO to follow up, so there's going to be 100% compliance there. It's the same with the rental reductions. If they're reduced to zero, there are no deductions to give, so there'll be 100% compliance. So what that means is that my theoretical $20 billion in savings would actually be 100% realised. My philosophy here is very consistent. I see a house as a service, not an investment. So that's why when it's your own home and you sell it, you don't pay capital gains tax. However, when an investor sells their property, we're also not going to have capital gains tax because it's the same idea. And for the same reason, we're not going to allow people to claim things like their interest. Politically, the idea here is not progressive or conservative. These policies are just making things more equal between renters and landlords. So politically, the idea is neutral. But if you really wanted to push things, you would actually argue that I'm leaning more conservative because high rates of individual ownership is traditionally a conservative ideology. There will definitely be some unintended consequences, but let's go through some of the more predictable ones. Three most obvious possible problems in my view are negative equity, housing shortage, and increased rents. In my video, Why Banks and Economists Fear Negative Equity, I actually solved this issue. And there are two things going on here. One is only an issue if people default. So the solution here is to actually give people money. If you're to give $10,000 to 500,000 first home buyers who bought in the last 5 years, that would cost $1 billion. Now, you can actually expand this idea, or you can increase the amount. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that this is only temporary. Once house prices are lower, people are not going to have these same issues. Most important thing here is that builders are able to keep on doing what they're doing, which is to build houses. And we should do everything we can to make sure that they stay in work and that they keep on building. So the solution would be for the federal government to buy land for builders to basically produce houses. Now that will result in some losses for the government, but remember, we've got $20 billion to play with. That is a lot of money, and that's an annual amount. So this is also just a temporary measure, because once the house prices fall down and stabilize, then you don't have this problem anymore. If there's any higher rents, they will just be short term. As house prices come down, rents tend to fall as well. Landlords can only charge the high rents that they do at the moment because renters can't afford to get a loan to buy their own place. So with these problems, they are all temporary and they're all solvable with a budget of $20 billion annually. I'm sure you'll think of other problems as well, but I want you to do two things. One is to figure out how much it would cost annually to fix, and the other thing is this just a temporary measure as house prices are falling, or is this something that is ongoing? So in conclusion, the capital gains tax on residential property should be reduced to zero. This gives the incentive for investors to sell existing properties. Now, this should be done in conjunction with removing all rental reductions. This will save $20 billion a year, which is more than enough to cover any unexpected outcomes. Landlords win because they get out of housing investment tax-free. Renters win because they get access to cheaper property. But even people with only one property win because it becomes cheaper to be able to move houses. So let's revisit my promise. I said it was going to reduce the price of housing, and it definitely is, because we're going to have a situation where investors are going to be selling to renters and they've got to sell it at a cheaper price. It's going to save the federal government billions of dollars, $20 billion to be precise, and it's going to make most voters happy. Now, there will be like an odd situation where someone may be disadvantaged by this, but most people in their self-interest are going to be better off. Now, it's also going to increase the rate of home ownership. The ideas presented here are really unique, and there doesn't seem to be anyone else out there putting anything close to this. But if you know someone, please link it in the comments. Now, I've spent a long time coming to terms with how this all works, but each time I go through it logically, I end up at the same place. I was not comfortable with my own ideas for a long time, so I'm not expecting you guys to understand it straight away, but I do want you to take the time to really fully consider it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and hit the like button. Please leave a review and a comment, particularly about if you have any questions related to anything that I've outlined in this video. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a mathematics teacher with a passion for teaching financial literacy. Please read the disclaimer.